What's up, guys? Welcome to If the Shoe Fits. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, a legendary guest in my books, Rob Schuh. How you doing today, Rob?
I'm doing very well, Amin. Thank you very much for having me on the channel. It is a pleasure to be here, man. I like that intro clip that you got going, especially ending on the Boso water slide. One of my favorite moments from that 2019 season for sure, man.
Yeah, that was a great moment. That game was a little bit slow, but I definitely loved that ending to that game where both ended in that
Mm-hmm.
spot. But yeah, and plus the Niners got that win that day, so
That's right. Hey, a tough defensive matchup is sometimes what you're going to get. It might be what we get against Seattle this weekend, and you just got to shift your expectations. You got to look for the hard hits. You got to look for the stops. You got to look for solid tackling, different things to hold your hat on, to hang your hat on, as opposed to a lot of scoring. But you never know how it's going to play out.
yeah. Well, without a further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off with, are the 49ers contenders or pretenders?
This one was a much harder question at the beginning of the season because I went into this year believing that the 49ers were for real. I mean, I came in believing that this was a talented roster, that it was deep, that it had key players at key positions that the 49ers were going to put into position to be successful. I underestimated what injuries could do to this roster. I underestimated the percentage of the playbook that was dedicated to Raheem Mostert. Certainly losing a number one overall cornerback, it's hard to get by. But, you thought you get more than one game out of Jason Verrett. When those things happen, we won those first two games. I thought, okay, they'll fight through it. And then it just fell off a cliff. And so there was a period of time where I would have said they were pretenders. Well, I did say on my channel, along with Matt Mayoko and some conservative beat writers, that the 49ers were a bad team at that point. And it pained me to say that. Really pains me to say when my 49ers are a bad team. But I think there's no question anymore. Now they are for real. Now they are contenders. Now they are in the driver's seat to get into the playoffs. They're firing on all cylinders. They have guys stepping up across the board, battling through some injuries this week, but for the most part, nothing too major. So for me, this one is a clear-cut case of the 49ers being contenders from here on out.
Yep. Yeah, like you said, like you mentioned, I mean, in the beginning of the season, it just wasn't looking good. Obviously, we got that win in Detroit, then we beat Philly, and then after that, it just fell off a complete cliff. Like,
Yes, it did.
first half against the Packers, we couldn't do nothing until Trey Lance came in for that touchdown. But it was just that game, 37 seconds left. That was a heartbreaking loss. And then after
Heartbreaker.
that, Arizona, Seattle, it just wasn't looking good. And the Niners bounced back and they turned it around, starting off with that win against the Rams on Monday Night Football, which wasn't like a 3 point win or win by a touchdown. It was a dominant 49ers win, and the Rams were a team that was considered to be Super Bowl favorites. And that whole storyline coming into that game was, oh, the Rams got Von Miller, the Rams got OBJ.
OBJ, yep.
Yeah, and that was the whole storyline. And the Niners destroyed them. Then we played. I forgot who we played after we played Jacksonville, and then we beat Jacksonville. That was
Jacksonville.
that was also a dominant performance. But then this last week against the Minnesota Vikings shows me that the Niners are contenders because the Minnesota Vikings, they beat Green Bay. We weren't able to beat Green Bay. Now we were 37 seconds away from beating Green Bay, but the Vikings have had Kirk Cousins is probably one of the most underrated quarterbacks in football because he's
Mm.
been playing really well. Had like 25 touchdowns this season. Has like 3 interceptions, including that one that he threw against in the Niners game. But Kirk Cousins, great quarterback, underrated. And then you have great weapons in Minnesota with Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. In the beginning of the game, that game just wasn't going well. Minnesota was scoring touchdowns, and the Niners threw an interception, and they scored touchdowns. So I was like, okay, this is not going to end up well. But then the Niners did what they do well, which is run the football down teams' throats, run it with Elijah Mitchell, run the ball 30 something times. And that's what they did. And the Niners won the game against a Vikings team that had some impressive wins this season, and a Vikings team that's a pretty darn good Vikings team. So, in my opinion, I think the Niners are contenders, and I saw it last week, and I saw it against the Rams game that the Niners are contenders after what I saw from the last 3 weeks, I think the Niners are contenders. And if they continue to do what they're good at, which is running the football down teams' throats, then I think the Niners have a chance to make a decent playoff run. Hopefully, the divisional round NFC Championship game would be nice.
That would be very sweet. I mean, you hit on a couple of really key points there. The game didn't break the way in which the 49ers want it to, right? They are a run-first team. They play complementary football. And so the way in which they want those games to break out is make sure that the 49ers keep up with the score the entire time so that you don't get behind, so that you don't have to shift to the pass. Things didn't go their way, and the game didn't break out in the way that they would have wanted against a team with, to your point again, a very powerful offense with two extremely elite wide receivers and a quarterback who I would agree is underrated within the league. Certainly has an arm that can get it anywhere on the field. He can make any throw that you need to make. And Dalvin Cook, who, while he did get injured in the game and hadn't been running at an elite level, is an elite running back. So they had all the threats on offense. They got up early, and this team was able to fight back. The 49ers were able to fight back. That shows true grit. It's like a heavyweight fight going 12 rounds. That was a very impressive win, even more so than the win against Los Angeles, which was a very convincing victory as well.
Yep. I mean, the only reason I say that I thought the Niners were contenders this week is because in LA, we've had LA's number for the last couple of years. Kyle Shanahan has had McVay's number for the last couple of years. Yep. So it's one of those things where the Niners, they beat the Rams, but then they could go and lose to Minnesota, or they could lose, possibly to Jacksonville. I didn't think they were going to lose to Jacksonville, but the Niners always had the Rams number for the last couple of years. So it's just one of those things where it's like, we beat the Rams, but then we lost like the Cardinals the week before, and we're losing to Seattle. So we know we can beat the Rams, but can they do that against another team? And they showed that against a good Minnesota Vikings team. And I feel like they deserve to be in the contenders conversation.
I think you're right.
Moving on to the next topic. I already discussed this on my show earlier called Red and Gold with Ben Meyerson. Nice. But I want to ask you this question. Should Trey Lance start the rest of the season? Now, earlier today, I asked Ben this question because people obviously on Twitter, including Grant, said that, the Niners should start Trey Lance this season because Jimmy Garoppolo can't win Super Bowl. We saw it in 2019. And this morning, or early in the afternoon today, Ben said, Trey Lance should start. And I was on the Jimmy Garoppolo train, which I'm usually not on. If you've watched my channel before, I am a Jimmy Garoppolo supporter in any sort of way. But I did lean towards Jimmy Garoppolo. But I want to get your thoughts on it. Should Trey Lance start for the rest of the season?
So I understand why people make that case. And I see the logic behind it to some extent. But where we are in the season right now, no, I cannot make a reasonable case for starting Trey Lance from this point forward. I think for me, the failed logic, if you were going to get Trey Lance involved year one, you had to trade Jimmy before the draft. That is where, to me, once you didn't do that, it was over. You had Jimmy's salary on the books. There were no quarterbacks that you could bring in that would even be serviceable backups after that. By the time you got through the draft, everyone that is a serviceable backup in the league was signed somewhere. And there was plenty of value. I mean, the 49ers flirted with a lot of quarterbacks, bringing them in. Guys that would have been great bridge quarterbacks, guys that could have played 6 games, and then you let Trey come in and take over whenever he's ready. When you didn't do that, when you stuck with Jimmy, when you guaranteed his salary, then you knew that they couldn't trade him, even if offers came in before the deadline. It had to be a really, really compelling offer for the 49ers to consider it at that point. And I'm guessing that there just weren't any that really made sense. And Jimmy has, to his credit, begun to play better. So do I think that he's a Super Bowl winning caliber quarterback? I don't know. I think it's unfair to say one way or the other definitively. Is it likely? I would say no. I think that you're counting on a solid run game. You're counting on an opportunistic defense. You're counting on getting hot at the right time. But maybe I'll save this until after I hear your take on it. But I do have sort of my secret desire for how it plays out. But no, for the remainder of the regular season, I think you have to stick with Jimmy Garoppolo so long as you have a legitimate shot at the playoffs, because winning is everything in the NFL.
Yep. Well, Ben, obviously I told you I do. Ben made up a good, obviously, like majority of other people that make the case for Trey Lance. Trey Lance, obviously, if the Niners are run for his team, that's why they should play Trey Lance. Jimmy
Yeah.
Garoppolo makes rookie mistakes, and Trey Lance is a rookie. I mean, he makes the same mistakes like Trey Lance does. All the stuff that you could use to make that argument. But my whole look on it is obviously, I since the beginning of the season, since we drafted Trey Lance, I wanted Trey Lance to start week 1. But
Yeah.
obviously it didn't happen, right? So my whole thing is these next couple of games are so crucial for the Niners if they want to make the playoffs. And obviously we know the Niners want to make the playoffs. That's what every football team, they want to win football games. They want to have a
Yes.
chance to make it to the Super Bowl. So the Niners, let's say I don't think number one Trey Lance is gonna play unless Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt. I don't think it's a possibility unless Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt.
I agree.
But my whole take on it is that I don't know if Trey Lance can win the remainder of the games. I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo can win the remainder of the games, but who do I have more faith in right now? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo or is it Trey Lance? I have more faith in Jimmy Garoppolo right now because I've seen Jimmy Garoppolo this whole season. He's played pretty much the majority of the season besides injury. Where Trey Lance, he's only played one game, full game this season. So it's like
Right.
you're throwing him in. If let's say they do play him, you're throwing him into that pressure situation where he has to pretty much win majority of the games in order for the Niners to make the playoffs. And if the Niners do make the playoffs, it's like, yes, I understand the case that people say, Jimmy Garoppolo's not the guy that's gonna win you a Super Bowl,
Right.
but no other rookie quarterback has ever won a Super Bowl either their first year. So it's like, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is gonna win a Super Bowl, but then at the same time, it's like, do I think Trey Lance is gonna win a Super Bowl in his first year? No, because no other rookie quarterback has done it. And if he did win a Super Bowl, it would be a miracle. It wouldn't
It
be one of those
would.
things. It wouldn't be one of those things where, oh, Trey Lance is so good, he won a Super Bowl. We hope he becomes so good. We hope he becomes a top 10, top 5 quarterback in football. But at the same time, Jimmy Garoppolo has that experience. He's played majority of the season. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I feel like, should be the starter in the remainder of the season. Next year, it's Trey Lance here. If Trey Lance next year is the guy. But
Yes.
as of right now, this year, do I think Trey Lance should be starting for the rest of the season? No, because the next couple of games are crucial. The Niners want to make the playoffs. And if the Niners do make it to the playoffs, right now where they're sitting, the Niners are like the 6th seed. If you play
Right.
Trey Lance for the rest of the season, and Trey Lance, let's say his first playoff game is going to be against Brady. His first playoff game, if he does play, and the Niners are the 6th seed, his first playoff game will be against Brady. Most likely that would not end up well.
You
Now,
wouldn't think so.
I'm not saying that it would end up well with Jimmy Garoppolo, but Jimmy Garoppolo, I feel like right now, he's the guy right now for this season, especially if the Niners want to make the playoffs. I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy, and plus he's also been there before. He's been to
Yep.
the playoffs before. He sat behind Brady in 2019, made it to the playoffs. We made it to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy to win the Super Bowl, but at the same time, Jimmy Garoppolo has been there and he has that experience also. So I'm leaning a little bit towards Jimmy Garoppolo right now, but next year, Trey Lance is the guy for me.
Yeah, it has to be Trey Lance next year. I think 49ers fans would riot if it weren't. I mean, you just cannot give up that amount of draft capital and not take advantage of it while it's still in the rookie contract. You have to let the young gentleman play while he is still inexpensive. That's the advantage of having a rookie quarterback. You can't carry a second quarterback who eats up the vast majority of your salary cap that you don't really have, that you can't afford. My hope, my secret hope, is that Trey has gotten ready enough to play to contribute in the playoffs because no one will have tape on him. No one will know what he can truly do. And when you see some of these guys with physical gifts, their first couple of games, look back at Kaepernick, look back at Lamar Jackson, they're basically unstoppable until defenses catch up with them. And sometimes it doesn't work out. You've got Justin Fields struggling on a poor Chicago team. But the 49ers are a far more talented offense.
Yeah.
If they can get him ready to play and then he helps with the playoff run, the two together might be able to push us over the edge.
Yep. I mean, yeah, like you said, even the Lamar Jackson case, that's a great point because I remember like even when the Niners played Lamar Jackson in his MVP year, it was super hard. I remember K1 Williams got his ankles broken. Like nobody could stop Lamar Jackson in his first full year.
No, it was
Nobody.
crazy.
It was insane. Breaking ankles, highlight plays every single Sunday. You would hear highlight plays from Lamar Jackson breaking someone's ankles, making flashy plays. That's what you heard from Lamar in his first year. That's just basically what you heard. But I definitely agree with that. So yeah,
I
forgot what
like
I was
it.
about to say. So I appreciate it, Karthik. He said just like, sub, and turn on the bell
Karthik's a
notification.
good dude.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Karthik. Moving on to the next topic. Obviously, Fred Warner is out against Seattle. So how will not having Fred Warner affect the 49ers against Seattle?
It's really big. I mean, you're talking about the quarterback of the defense, the guy who gets everybody set. And on top of that, he's the emotional leader of the team. I was just reading an article today that describes Matt Barrows, one of my favorite beat writers for the 49ers. I love his sense of humor. I love the way in which he writes. I was reading his article, and he described that every day at practice, this was the first day of practice that Fred Warner has missed to an injury. Like, that's wild. Since he got here, this is the first day of practice that he's missed due to injury. But he comes out and he sets the tone. He runs to the middle of the field. He gets the energy up. He's high-fiving guys. And Matt Barrows described that energy as being missing from practice. And that's practice, right? So what's going to happen in the game? What type of energy will we be missing? Will guys be in poor assignments because they're not set up for success? Possibly. I'm optimistic, though. I think Aziz has shown himself to be a very capable individual. And while he may not be the same vocal leader that Fred Warner is, I believe he sets the tone on defense with his thumping ability. He lays down some amazing hits. And talk about firing other members of the defense up. It's one thing to say something to get them riled. It's another to light up the running back coming through one of the gaps. That sure sends some chills through other defenders' spines. And that's what you need. You need a leader in some way. It doesn't have to be vocal. It can be with the tone you set on the field. I am optimistic that Aziz can fill in suitably. I don't think he is Fred Warner, but I think he can fill in.
Yeah. I think, obviously, not Fred Warner. I love Fred Warner. He hasn't missed, like you said, he hasn't pretty much missed a game his entire time as a Niner. He's pretty much played majority of the games when he was the starter. And he, like you said also, he hasn't missed a practice until now because of injury. But I feel like, as much as I know Fred Warner is a loss for us, I think Aziz, since we have Aziz, and since if Greenlaw does play, I feel like we will be fine. Now, obviously, we know what impact Fred Warner brings, but at the same time, am I worried because we don't have Fred Warner? No, because I also believe in Aziz, and I also believe if Greenlaw does play, I also believe in Greenlaw. Because I feel like both of those guys, obviously, they're not Fred Warner. They're not Fred Warner, right? We know something like Fred Warner, great tackler. Whereas Aziz, he makes tackles, he's all over the ball, but he does miss some tackles here and there.
He does. He missed 2 in that Minnesota game.
He misses some tackles, but at the same time, I feel like Greenlaw and Aziz can fill in, like you said, for Fred Warner. Now, I don't think they're going to have the same impact vocally because, like, even before the games, I don't know, the Niners post on Twitter pretty much every game, Fred Warner warming up the defense, giving them their speech before the game, pregame speech, and getting them all hyped up before the game. So he's a vocal leader. I don't think Aziz is that, nor do I think Greenlaw is that. I don't think that they can replace Fred Warner in that aspect, but do I think we will be fine without Fred Warner just for this game? Yeah, I do think so because I feel like Aziz and Greenlaw can fill in.
Yeah, the Greenlaw situation is one to keep your eye on because it seems to be trending as if he may not play, and that would leave us with Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, who is a undrafted free agent, much like Aziz, but was a college safety converted to linebacker. He's our core special teamer. So then you have a domino effect where you've got a core special teamer that's now stepping into a role he's not as comfortable and stepping out of that special teams role. And now you're counting on probably some rookie to come in and be a sure tackler on special teams. And you saw the 49ers allow a 99-yard kickoff return. So it's the unintended sort of butterfly effect that happens from one player being out. And I would agree with the comment you had up earlier that was, I think the Niners rushed Greenlaw back. And I think you get what you get when you rush a dude back, which is why I'm all for sit Debo, sit Fred, because don't rush him back. Don't re-injure him.
Yeah. Drake Greenlaw is a talented linebacker. He was, before the season, he was my breakout player of the year in the first game. Pick six,
baby.
He was playing pretty good in the first game, and I was like, oh, Drake Greenlaw's going to have his Fred Warner type year this season. He's going to have that breakout year where everybody considered him, a top linebacker, and then with the injury, obviously that went downhill. But same with Aziz also, like, I feel like with all our guys healthy, I think the linebacker core is probably our strongest group, especially the three starters.
Mm.
So you have Greenlaw, you have Aziz, and you have Fred Warner. That's probably the strongest position group on the Niners. I would say probably over receiver or even over D line because all three of those guys are pretty darn good. So
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have agreed with you at the beginning of the year, but it has worked out in a way that seems to be the case. With the way in which Aziz is playing, if he can continue at this level, that'll be really something. Because then you've got the inexpensive complement to Fred Warner after that big contract.
yep. 49er Minded. Shout out 49er Minded. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel before, go do so. Hit him with a subscribe to his channel. Hit him with a like. He said, I feel like we're the only team who brings back guys after injuries, only for them to get injured again in their first game back. I'm pretty sure he's referring to Verrett. Now,
Yep.
the only reason I'm grateful about that whole Verrett situation is because it was a 1 year. Because
Right.
let's say we signed Verrett to like a 3-year,
Oh my
$30 million
goodness.
contract, that would not end up, most likely would not end up well for the Niners. So
No.
I'm glad Verrett wasn't, I'm glad the Niners only gave him a 1 year. Because like you look at some of the other guys in the cornerback market, those guys wanted 3-year, 4-year big contracts.
Yep.
Shaquille Griffin, he wanted a big contract. He got a big contract. Where let's say the Niners signed Verrett to a big contract, 3-year, whatever, 3-year, 2-year contract, it probably wouldn't end up well for the Niners because they would probably have to pay him his money, and they probably give him some sort of guaranteed in that contract, and you have to pay him, and he's injured for this entire season, and who knows how well he'll be if he does play next year. So my whole look on that is I'm just glad it was a 1 year deal because you don't have
Yeah.
to sign him next year if you don't want to.
That's absolutely true. And you could also go back to the preseason plan. You could say it was unwise to put so many eggs in that basket, considering what Jason Verrett has been through in his career. That while it was surprising he was injured and lost for the year in week 1, it was not surprising that he got injured at some point. Had he gotten injured in week 10, it wouldn't have been a surprise at all because that's sort of the trend for his career. So you should go back and look and say, we didn't have that third cornerback we needed. If you were going to rely as Verrett on starter from day one, you really need to invest in a less expensive veteran that is a more third cornerback behind E-Man, so that when you did eventually lose Verrett for a couple of games,
Yeah.
you had someone more suitable than Josh Norman to step in.
Yeah, but I mean, that's my one of my biggest issues with the Niners. I don't know if you have the same problem. Is that I feel like the Niners don't value the position of cornerback.
They don't.
The Niners straight up just don't value the position of cornerback. Like they believe so much in their passers, and they think their
Yep.
passers are so good.
Defensive
It's like we're
line.
gonna win in the trenches, but at the same time, it's like, yes, you have Nick Bosa, and then Eric Armstead's overpaid, but outside of that, you really have anybody that's like you don't necessarily have. Especially we saw it this season. It's like how much can Nick Bosa do? But outside of that, you don't necessarily have that second guy who's like super dominant like Bosa. You don't have necessarily a top 10 defensive line in football. And that's my biggest issue is that like when I don't understand with Kyle and John is like when you play in a division like the NFC West and you
Yeah.
don't value the position of cornerback, it's
That's
like
tough.
you look at the guys in your division, Cooper Kupp, who's probably number 1 receiver in fantasy, by the way.
Yep.
And he's just been
Yep.
leading the league in receiving yards. You have Robert Woods, now OBJ, so that's an amazing trio of receivers. You have in Arizona, you have AJ Green, Rondale Moore, who's a young star, who's only gonna get better. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's arguably a top 2 receiver in football. And then you have Seattle with Tyler Lockett, who's super underrated. And then you have DK Metcalf, who I remember last year in Seattle, DK Metcalf had a game against us.
Yes.
Last year, Russ to DK. We just couldn't tackle DK. We couldn't stop DK.
No answer.
The first half, I remember we couldn't stop DK. It got a little bit better in the second half, but we couldn't stop DK.
Yep.
And
Super frustrating.
Yep. And after that, I still don't understand why the Niners don't value the position of corner. Because one thing that irked me really badly in this specific draft was you had the 43rd pick. You could have gotten Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah.
But instead, the Niners were like, let's get Aaron Banks. And number 1, he's not even playing. Number 2, most of the games he's inactive. And you couldn't. Let's say the Niners didn't have a second-round pick. That wouldn't even affect the team's success this year. Where let's say they drafted Asante Samuel Jr. this year with a second-round pick, that would affect your team, and Asante Samuel Jr. most likely would be on the field.
That's the most painful thing is when you failed to take a player who is playing in a dominant fashion. By the way, shout out to Ben Camperman there, the Camper Report. And then you're looking at a player you did take and that didn't pan out. That's the worst, is that you're comparing someone who's lighting the league on fire with someone who hasn't gotten any playing time. If Aaron Banks were in, contributing at right guard, and we were that much more of a power run team because we had a heftier guy at right guard and it freed up Brunskill to be the swing tackle again, and we had all this offensive line depth. If that had played out in that way, it wouldn't be such a gripe, right? We would still be talking about how it was a bad idea to put all your eggs into Jason Verrett's basket, but at least it wouldn't be as painful of a miss in the second round. But when you compare what everyone saw to be a star at a position of need for the team versus more of a luxury pick in developing a run-first offensive line that can maul people, and then it didn't work out, that's so painful because interior linemen in the second round, they have to start. That's what you're picking them for.
Yeah, and what even makes it worse is that, you probably know, but there's a dude in the 5th, 6th round that the Niners drafted, also an offensive lineman. He goes by the name of Jalen Moore. And he's playing for the Niners. Obviously, now that is because of McGlinchey being injured, but he got more time in the preseason, and he's pretty much active for pretty much majority of the season, except for like 1 or 2 games. He's been active. Majority of the season, Aaron Banks has been inactive. So it's like one of those things where it's like, yes, obviously, we know about Asante Samuel Jr. He's lighting up the league, but at the same time, if Aaron Banks was at least contributing to the team this year, but he's not. So it's just one of those things where it's like, he's not even contributing to you anymore. He's not even playing. And majority of the games, he's inactive. So he's not even on the field wearing his pads ready to go.
That makes it even more painful.
Yep. Well, moving on to the next topic. Is there a trade market for Jimmy G?
I think absolutely there is. Come the offseason, right? As of right now, obviously, we're past the trade deadline. Jimmy still has his no trade clause for this season, but it's my understanding that expires as the league year expires this year. And there will be a handful of teams that are looking to upgrade at quarterback. I do think you have to look at the way in which this season ends. We know that Jimmy G can be an inconsistent quarterback at times. He hasn't been for the past 4 to 5 weeks. He's looked pretty sharp. He certainly had a misstep in the Minnesota game, but he responded. Kyle got into his face big time, and Jimmy responded. I was nervous that interaction. I see Jimmy's confidence as not being concrete, as being a little bit fragile. I'm not trying to get down on the guy. I'm not trying to insult him as a man or anything like that. But
after that sorry to cut you off, but after that injury, I feel like after that injury against the Chiefs, when he had an injury, I feel like his confidence just completely went down after that.
I agree.
He stopped running. He stopped using his legs. He became more afraid. And you look like guys like Mahomes and all that. Like, you look at them when his team is down, motivating their guys and the teammates. Jimmy Garoppolo throws an interception, laughs it off. Or he's not one of those guys like Brady, or like he'll go on the sideline if his team is down. He'll rally his guys. I saw that in 2017. I saw that before the injury. Jimmy would go on the sideline against Tennessee, and he would like rally his teammates. He's like, guys, we can still do this. Let's go out there and, score a game-winning field goal. But I don't see that from Jimmy Garoppolo. Even now, I didn't see it last year. I didn't even see it in 2019.
He's a shell of himself. I couldn't point to what it is, whether it is the injury that certainly seems to line up with when the confidence was lost, or whether it's Kyle Shanahan and his OCD perfectionism and the way in which he rides players. You hear people talk about that. These players are no longer getting in each other's faces in the locker room. They have said that repeatedly. You heard Juice talk about it, that really that's not the style of the NFL anymore. Kyle is that style. And so if players are no longer used to people in their faces, and Kyle wants to get into players' faces, you wonder if that just doesn't jive with some of these personality types, some of these athletes. If you go back and watch post-game presser of Jimmy Garoppolo in 2017 and Jimmy Garoppolo now, he's a shell of his former self. He was so much more confident. It was clear as day. His body language was different. He was riding a high that year, no doubt about it, but something has happened since then.
Mm-hmm. You remember those suits that he was wearing when he won his first couple of games?
I do.
Like, unbuttoning up suits and all that. Jimmy was looking nice. He was
Jimmy GQ, baby.
He was on
Yep,
cloud nine in 2017.
that's a fact.
Yeah, but for me, honestly, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo has a trade market because I don't know what team necessarily wants a guy like Jimmy G. Because with Jimmy G, he's inconsistent, and
Hmm.
my biggest issue with Jimmy G is obviously his contract, number one. But then
Yes.
also he's such an injury-prone player. If I'm a smart GM and if I'm a smart owner of a team, I'm like, why would I want this guy on my team? He has a huge contract, number one, and he's inconsistent, and then also with his injury issues. Like, let's say a team does trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, and the Niners want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, which I heard there's reports about, it, and the Niners do
Yep.
trade Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know what team necessarily wants Jimmy Garoppolo because, like the things I mentioned before, he's injury prone, he's inconsistent, and he has such a high contract. It's like, do I really want this dude on my team? I could trade for him, and then he could just get hurt the first game with a high ankle sprain or whatever it might be, and he can miss the whole season because that's just what Jimmy Garoppolo is. He's injury prone, he's inconsistent, and he just has such a big contract. So it's just one of those things where if I'm a GM, I don't know if I want Jimmy Garoppolo on my team, and I don't
That's a fair
know.
point. And I think in that contract you don't. But what I expect to happen is a sign and trade of sorts, that there will be some negotiation that occurs before the trade occurs where the agent and the new team get together, Jimmy's agent and the new team get together, and they agree in principle on a new contract that wipes out the $27 million cap figure for next year and makes it much more manageable and spreads it out over 2 to 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years, where it's the same guaranteed money for Jimmy. He's still guaranteed to take home the same minimum amount, but it gives him a much higher ceiling because I think Jimmy knows that if he doesn't renegotiate that contract, if nobody does trade for him, now he's probably getting cut because the 49ers need that cap space. They are up against it next year. And so the intelligent business move for him is to renegotiate, is to get into a new, more manageable deal where he can go to a new team and start over from there at a more moderate price tag.
Yeah, but as his contract is right now and as it stands, I don't know what team. If I'm a GM of any other team, and as a fan, if Jimmy Garoppolo came to my team via trade, I would not be happy. I
Mm,
would not be happy, especially if we had the same contract. There's
yeah.
no, if I'm a fan of another team, I'm like, no, please. Like, I don't understand. Is my GM dumb? I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know why you would bring in Jimmy Garoppolo because of all the things I mentioned. So, even in a fan's perspective, if I'm a team fan of the Browns or the Steelers or like the Chargers or whatever team it might be, and if my team traded for Jimmy Garoppolo at that price tag that Jimmy Garoppolo's contract is, I would not be a happy fan.
It'd be interesting. Pittsburgh is one to keep your eye on from me. I mean, that could play out in such a way. He's a blue collar dude that comes from, roundabout that area in the country. That one intrigues me because I don't know what they're going to do after Ben Roethlisberger if they don't have a decent draft pick.
Yep. I mean, we'll see what happens with that whole Steelers situation. They have Dwayne Haskins on the bench, who is a former first-round pick, so who knows how
Right.
that will work out. But Ben is not probably. Ben is either going to retire next year, or he's just not going to be this. He's not going to be a Steelers starting quarterback next year.
Yeah, I
So that's
wouldn't think
also
so.
being a situation. But yeah, well, moving on to the next topic, we already talked about who's out on defense. Now let's talk about who's out on offense. We already know who's out on offense. Obviously, Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon's out on offense. How big of a loss is Trey Sermon? No, I'm just playing. Deebo Samuel, in my opinion, should be Offensive Player of the Year. Probably the best player on the Niners right now, the MVP for the Niners right now. Deebo Samuel's out against the Seattle Seahawks. How big of a loss is this for the 49ers against a Seattle team? And how will it affect the Niners in this game?
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. You look at how efficient he has been, no matter how we get him the ball, no matter whether we're throwing it to him in space and he's racking up the yak yards as he continues to do as the league's yak king, the far and away leader in yak yards per reception. I think he's averaging like 10 yards of yak yards per reception. That is insane, really insane. His figures this year, I said this on my show, but for anyone who didn't see that, he now has 1,000 yards receiving. He now has 1,000 yards receiving and 5 receiving touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns. There are only 3 players in the NFL to ever do that, and the other 2 are Roger Craig and Marshall Faulk. So when you're on a list with Marshall Faulk and Roger Craig, you're doing something right. When you're comparing yourself to those two, one a Hall of Famer, one should be a Hall of Famer, it's a spectacular season. What I will say, though, is it's an opportunity for the San Francisco 49ers. They're fortunate to be up against a team that has their back against the ropes. Seattle Seahawks have not been playing well. Obviously, their record clearly illustrates that they have not been playing well. Washington football team seems like a reasonable approximation of the San Francisco 49ers in how they attacked Seattle. You could see the 49ers having a very similar game to what the Washington football team did against Seattle. So you would think they could win without Debo, right? It sets up pretty nicely. The reason I say it's a potential advantage is this team needs to be more diverse. You cannot rely on two players the way in which the 49ers do and go into the playoffs thinking that you're going to light the world on fire. The odds of one of them getting dinged up or one of them getting shut down by a team that has additional time to prep and take them out of it. And now what do you have? So this is an opportunity for Jimmy to spread the ball around, wake George Kittle up, and get back to a few of those dominant performances that he has had over the years. Maybe get Brandon Ayuk more involved. So I think this presents as an opportunity.
Trade to the Bay. Maybe.
Trade to the Bay.
Maybe, but I mean, this is a huge loss for the Niners. Like with Fred Warner, you have Aziz. You have Dre Greenlaw if he possibly plays against Seattle. But with Deebo Samuel, it's like none of the receivers on our team has asked to do what Deebo Samuel has been asked to do this season.
No.
Deebo Samuel has been used in the backfield. I don't know any other receiver that's been asked to use in the backfield as a running back.
It's wild.
At least I haven't even seen it this year. I haven't seen it my entire time watching football. I know I haven't watched football for a long time, but I've never seen a receiver play running back for multiple snaps. And Deebo is dominant as a running back if he's lined up and used in the backfield, and as a wide receiver. He's killing in both aspects in the game, right? So it's like one of those things where you see running backs do it, where you see running backs, sometimes lined up as a receiver, and you see them, sometimes having great rushing games, having 1,000-yard seasons, like how Christian McCaffrey had a 1,000-yard rushing season. He had a 1,000-yard receiving season. You see running backs do it, but then you don't see wide receivers be lined up in the running back and you be used as a running back. And Deebo has just been straight up dominating in both aspects of the game. And Deebo Samuel, even when the offense was struggling this season, when they were just struggling where Jimmy's missing throws, we had 0 points up on the board, Deebo Samuel was that one bright spot where it would be a little screen pass and he would run for 30, 40, 50 yards. Deebo Samuel would make plays and make stuff happen for the Niners. And this is just a huge loss for the Niners this game. Now, do I think the Niners can still beat Seattle? Definitely. But would it be way, 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 way easier with Deebo Samuel in the game and what the Niners like to do? Yes, it would definitely be way easier with Deebo Samuel, especially what the Niners like to do with Deebo and how they use him. It would definitely be way, 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 way easier. But I definitely do understand your point. I definitely agree with your point that it'll definitely change something, and the Niners definitely will have to do something different because they can't rely on Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, they can't rely on Deebo and Elijah Mitchell in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you would think that there's no way that they can give more carries to Elijah Mitchell, right? You're already maxing him out. He had 27 carries in the last game.
The finger injury.
Yeah, you're not going to dump more carries on him. So other players need to step up. That to me is the obvious need for the 49ers.
Yep, and I mean Ayuk has been stepping up. That's great. We love to see Ayuk getting more involved week per week, week by week. So it's definitely great to see Ayuk getting more involved. But in the playoffs, if we think using Deebo and using Elijah Mitchell is going to work every single game throughout the playoffs, possibly, but I don't think it's likely because Elijah Mitchell, obviously with his injury, and he just had surgery like a week or two ago. So it's like you can't make his workload bigger. You can't give him, 30, 35 carries. You can't use him like the Tennessee Titans use Derrick Henry.
He's not big enough for that.
Like that. You're already using him kind of like that. Where you're giving him like 27 carries, but you can't extend his load and you can't put more on his load. And then with Deebo, obviously it's great to have Deebo this season. Deebo's been dominating, but at the same time, Kyle, you have to remember, Deebo's the same guy that missed majority of last year. Same guy that missed in his rookie year. Last year he got hurt and he wasn't even playing. He was just practicing in the offseason and he got hurt for the majority of the season. So it's like one of those things where you also have to understand with Deebo is, yes, Deebo's played majority of the season. at the same time, we know what Debo is. We know what Debo's body is. He's not one of those guys that's playing all the time. He's always on the field. No, he's an injury-prone player. So it's just one of those things where if you're relying on Debo and Elijah Mitchell in the playoffs, most likely it won't work. If you're just relying on those two players, so.
Yeah, I got to give Debo credit for shedding a bit of that injury-prone label this year. Aside from this tweak that seems to be minor, he really did reshape the body and get into the yoga, and that really has helped with those soft tissue injuries. With the amount of use he has had, I think that it's unfair to assume he wouldn't have gotten injured. I think most players, if you used him as much as we've been using Debo, you're going to get nicked up somehow, some way. So as long as he comes back and finishes out this season, it's just such a dominant performance. I would say that you couldn't shut Debo down if we had more of a deep threat from Jimmy's arm. But because we're missing that angle from our quarterback, then Debo can't implement that aspect of his game. And so you do need to find other weapons. And this is the Niners' opportunity to see who those guys are going to be down the stretch.
Yep, definitely. Moving on to the next topic. Where the 49ers sit right now, they're the 6th seed. And in the first round of the playoffs, they would be playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So my question to you is, with everybody healthy, for possibly if they are all coming back and we don't have any more injuries until the playoffs, do the 49ers have a chance to beat the Buccaneers in the playoffs?
I think absolutely they have a chance. Is it a big chance? Is it probable? That's a stretch. The Bucs set up as a challenging matchup for the 49ers. They also, much like all those teams that you mentioned and went through in the NFC West, have a very elite receiving core. So on defense for the 49ers, that's immediately a challenge. When you look at Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown. That's pretty ridiculous. Not to mention the guy who's throwing them the ball, Tom Brady, who I think you might argue would be the greatest of all time.
The GOAT. Yeah.
The GOAT. So that's a problem. The 49ers would have trouble containing that. Could Bosa potentially end the career of the GOAT? Sure, maybe, but I think it's more likely that Tom would make the 49ers pay on offense, and you'd have to keep up with them. The Bucs present what you don't want on defense. The San Francisco 49ers struggle with strong interior rushers, and the Bucs have Vita Vea and they have Ndamukong Suh. And those guys get after the freaking quarterback from the interior like nobody's business. Jimmy doesn't do well with that up-the-gut pressure. Brunskill doesn't do well with bull rushes. Both of those guys are incredible bull rushers. If it isn't Aaron Donald who he's going up against, he struggles with interior pressure. So I would think they would be in Jimmy's face. We would need to run our game plan, our identity, run the ball, whether it's working early or not. Don't fall into the victim of dropping back to pass all the time. You need to keep Tom Brady on the sideline. You've got to extend drives, no mistakes. It's got to be complimentary football to have a chance. But the Niners have proven they're capable of that. They may not be consistent, but when they do it, it looks spectacular.
Yep. Now, obviously, there is a slight chance that the Niners could beat the Bucs, but obviously it's going to be in Tampa. But there's a slight chance, but at the same time, Brady is Brady. Brady is the GOAT. Okay, Brady is the GOAT, and we know what Brady does in the playoffs. We saw it last year. Brady dominates in the playoffs. You just can't bet against Brady in the playoffs. Most likely, you will end up regretting betting against Brady in the playoffs.
Unless they're playing the Giants, in which case, feel free to bet against Brady.
I mean, yeah, that is a good point, but at the same time, the Giants are probably not going to be in the playoffs this year.
No, they are not.
Yes.
They're not going to play spoilers this year.
Yeah, but most likely, Brady's just dominating the playoffs. So most likely, the Niners, if they do see the Bucs, most likely they're not going to end up winning it. But we obviously know the saying any given Sunday. But one thing that we have to look at the Bucs is that their cornerback core isn't that great. They're weak at corner.
It's decimated.
They had Richard Sherman, his injury. He missed a couple of weeks. They signed him. They thought he was gonna, add some veteran leadership, and they thought he was gonna be a player for them because they were just decimated with injuries at the cornerback position. but also he got injured. Some of the other guys got injured. So that is one of those things where like, oh look, the Buccaneers, they're decimated with injuries at corner. But at the same time, it's like you look at our quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, and you look at, obviously you mentioned the defensive line with Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul. It's like Jimmy Garoppolo. I know Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not going to be able to take advantage in a major way against that Bucks secondary. Because Jimmy Garoppolo, like, I don't have any faith in Jimmy Garoppolo's arm to win me football games. Now, you can run the ball. That's probably the only way that I can see the Niners winning the game. Is like you run the ball down the Bucks' throats. Even if it's not working at first, you have to keep running the ball down the Bucks' throats. You have to hold the football and, consume clock. That's the only way I see them having a chance. But then they also have a pretty darn good defensive line. So it's just one of those things where even if you look at some of the Bucks' weak points, which I said, like their cornerback position, can Jimmy Garoppolo thread the needle and make the throws to tear apart the Bucks' defense or tear apart the Bucks' corners? I don't think so. And running the ball is going to be tough against them because they have a dominant defensive line. But that's my only way I see them having a chance is consuming clock and running the football. Because I don't think you're going to win by making Jimmy Garoppolo thread the needle because they have a weak secondary.
No, I wouldn't want Kyle to dip into that game plan. I would want him to stay with the run-first approach. And don't get me wrong, Jimmy has the occasional gunslinging game in him. He's capable of it. It's not that he's completely incapable, but I don't trust him to do it. It's not the game plan I want to go in with. Mm-hmm. Every now and then he has one of those great games. It's happened year in and year out, once or twice. But going into that matchup, yeah, I think that you would have to acknowledge that the Bucks would be the heavy favorite in that scenario. You got to hope that the 49ers go a different route in the playoffs because there are some more beatable teams. Maybe you get to the Bucks in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for the Niners to get the 5th seed because I think the Niners and the Cowboys would be a much favorable matchup.
That would be phenomenal
for the Niners, and that's again that the Niners actually have a chance to win. It would be a 50-50 for me. It could either be the Cowboys winning or the Niners winning. But with this one, it's kind of one of those things where it's like 70-30, 60-40, whichever way you want to put it, because the Bucks and Brady in the playoffs, especially Brady in the playoffs, it's just one of those things where most likely you're not coming out with a victory. In the regular season, yeah. But let's say, like, even Washington, right? Like, Washington beat the Bucks. But let's say Washington met them in the playoffs. Most likely Brady would win the playoffs against Washington if that game happened again. Because we know what Brady does in the playoffs. Brady's pretty much, you can't bet against Brady in the playoffs. It's just one of those things where most likely it won't end up well for you. Unless Nick Foles, you know what the Niners should do? Trade for Nick Foles and have Nick Foles, put Jimmy Garoppolo on the bench to play Nick Foles against the Niners. Because, maybe we might have a chance with Nick Foles. But moving on to the next topic, let's start, some position versus, who you got on this one? Bobby Wagner versus Fred Warner. Who do you think is the better linebacker? Now, Warner's obviously not playing in this game.
Right.
But who do you think is the better linebacker? Not obviously career-wise, because Fred Warner hasn't had the longest career, but just this season, who is the better linebacker?
This one is tough for me to say definitively one way or the other because, quite honestly, I've not studied Bobby Wagner individually this season in the way that I've looked at Fred Warner. But the way I break it down is Fred Warner has not had the statistical season that people were expecting him to have. I came real close to placing a bad wager on Fred Warner to be the defensive player of the year because I thought he was poised to break out as such. He's had a solid statistical year, but it's been entirely devoid of the big plays that you need in order to get mentioned with Darius Leonard, who is, aside from Josh Norman, the king of the peanut punch, right? He is forcing fumbles. Fred hasn't had the fumbles. He hasn't recovered the fumbles. He hasn't gotten the interceptions. And we were told that he was going to have more opportunities to rush the passer this year. The percentage of snaps that Fred Warner has been able to rush the passer is down significantly from 2020. So what we were led to believe he would be afforded the opportunity to do in DeMeco Ryans' new defensive scheme hasn't borne out to fruition. And part of that probably has to do with injuries along the defensive line and the 49ers defense just not quite being the unit that we had all predicted. But it's fair to say, statistically speaking, his season is down. But Bobby Wagner is the more accomplished of the two. So if I'm giving this award based on who has had the greater career, I'm going Bobby Wagner. If I'm choosing one this year, both having down years, neither being spectacular, both teams struggling. If I'm picking one to be the future of my defense, I'm still all in on Fred Warner. I still love what I'm seeing there. Guys have down years. It happens, and it's a reflection of what he's being asked to do. It's a reflection of a new defensive coordinator, and it's a reflection of the rest of the defense not living up to the hype that we had placed on him at the beginning of the year. So I don't place all the blame on Fred Warner's down season squarely on his shoulders, although I love him as a leader because he puts the blame on himself. He takes accountability, and that's what I want to see from a guy that I'm going to label as the quarterback of my defense. So I'm still on Team Warner.
This, now obviously, if we're talking about career-wise, we obviously know it's Wagner, because Wagner's had the longer career, he's had the more accomplished career.
Right.
He's had the Super Bowl. He just had the stats. Obviously, he has better stats because he just had a longer career. But if we're talking about this specific season, I'm not a Seattle Seahawks fan, but Wagner just had a little bit of a better season this year than Warner has. Mm-hmm. Warner, we thought he was going to be much better than he was this season. He's gone in his bag. We expected him to have an amazing type season. This year, last year we called him All-Pro Fed. This year, I don't even know if he's going to make the All-Pro team this year. Because it's just one of those things where it's like, Fred Warner, he's been good, but he's not been last year.
That's right.
Hungry for a contract, wanting a contract, Fred Warner, that type of Fred Warner type good. He's been good, but he's not been Fred Warner, hungry Fred Warner good. So Wagner, if you look at the stats, has better tackles, has more tackles than him, has more forced fumbles, he has more sacks than him. So it's just one of those things where it's, if you just look at the stats, Wagner is better. But if I am starting a team and would I choose between Wagner or if I wanted Warner, I'm definitely choosing Warner because Warner is a leader. He's a vocal leader, like you said, and he's younger, and I feel like he's better at coverage than Wagner is. And I feel like I value a linebacker who can cover and who's good at coverage. So if I'm building a team and I'm building a defense and I want one linebacker either between Wagner and Warner, I'm taking Warner.
I'm with you on that. I am absolutely with you on that.
Moving on to the offensive side, Deebo Samuel versus DK Metcalf. And this one kind of annoys me a little bit because last year, and even in the offseason, I was like, why did Niners take Deebo Samuel? You could have had A.J. Brown. You could have had DK Metcalf. You could have had Terry McLaurin. I'm like, why did Niners take Deebo Samuel? I don't get it. Deebo Samuel's an injury-prone receiver who just, I just don't know. He can't even see the field, while DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown are guys that are considered like top 10 receivers in football. So there's those teams where I was just like, why, Kyle? Why did you go with the guy that you liked more instead of the guy that was probably like the best player at that position available?
Right.
But now when you look at it, Kyle Shanahan and Deebo Samuel, Kyle Shanahan was probably right for taking Deebo because now we look at Deebo and Deebo's just straight up killing this year. Having way better numbers than DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and Terry McLaurin. So it's just one of those things where now you understand why Kyle did it. And it kind of absurd to me that people would still take DK Metcalf over Deebo Samuel this year. I've heard people say it. They'll say they had the question presented to them, Deebo or DK Metcalf, and people will still say DK. Or if it's A.J. Brown and Deebo, they'll still say A.J. Brown, or Terry McLaurin or Deebo. They'll still say Terry McLaurin. What's your whole thoughts on that? Do you think Deebo is better than DK Metcalf? And do you think it's a little bit absurd that people still would take some of the guys in his draft class like DK and AJ over Deebo Samuel?
I can't say it's absurd for those people to say that they would still draft those individuals above Deebo, but I certainly wouldn't. When that draft rolled around, I had my eyes on A.J. Brown. I loved his tape. I loved his attitude. What I loved most of all was the statement he made about wanting to run the hill with Jerry Rice, that if the Niners drafted him, he was going to run the hill. And that's a mindset thing for me. So in getting to DK, That's my issue with him for the most part, and potentially why he fell in the draft. That yes, it looked like he had tight hips and that he wasn't going to be able to move in space in the way that he has illustrated that he can. So people thought he was a physical freak, that it wasn't going to translate like Megatron on the field. But the other piece of it that I have seen that seems to have materialized is I don't think he has a great attitude. I don't think he's a positive guy. I don't think he's a leader. He appears to be more of a negative impact on the team when things aren't going well. And Debo, when again, if you follow him on Instagram or look at any of his social media, what you'll notice immediately is he is staying in the positivity right now. He is motivating himself through positive thoughts, through positive energy. And that's contagious. When you see him on the sideline messing around, fooling around with Elijah Mitchell and the guy with the first down marker, and those pictures come out after the game, in a game that he left because of injury, like that's the happy-go-lucky type of attitude this 2019 49ers team had. They were all going to softball games together to watch the equipment guys play softball on their time off. They were all friends. It was everyone had each other's backs, and that creates a cohesive team atmosphere. You can have all the physical gifts, but if you destroy the chemistry of the locker room, I don't want you on my team. And that's what I see from DK Metcalf. I see a guy who is more about DK than he is about the team. And in Debo, he's still about Debo. He still wants that money, but he is there for the team. He is a positive influence, and everybody seems to rally around him.
Yeah, obviously, as any player at any position, you want that bag. You want to get your money, especially
got to get that money,
right? But I definitely agree with you. DK Metcalf is one of those type of players where he kind of reminds me of a little bit of a obviously more physical, bigger Antonio Brown, especially with mindset wise. Where Antonio Brown, same thing with DK Metcalf. His team could be up by 30, and if he's not getting the football, he's gonna be upset. Or if his team is losing, he's gonna be upset. Or if he didn't get the ball, he's not gonna be happy. It's just one of those things where I feel like DK is about DK. And same thing with Debo. Debo is about Debo, but he's also a team player, and he has the right mindset and the right attitude. Or with DK Metcalf, I just don't get that. And when I look back at it, like, yes, DK was obviously a more physical and better receiver, and he was at the time a better receiver in the last couple of years because of Debo's injuries. But when I look at it now, it's just that DK just didn't have the right mindset. And I was an AJ Brown guy also. I had a little mock draft. I had my whiteboard. I said Nick Bosa, AJ Brown. And then when they drafted Debo Samuel, I'm like, who is this dude? Like, I never heard of Debo Samuel from South Carolina. And then I had to go do my work on that and go study all of that. But AJ Brown was my guy, especially when I saw him have that picture with Jerry Rice where he had the Super Bowl ring with the Jerry Rice.
Yep.
He was my guy. I wanted AJ Brown over DK Metcalf. But obviously that didn't happen. But Debo's definitely better than DK, and he's shown that this year because Debo can do it all. He's used as a running back, he's a receiver, he can do it all. And like the stats, 1,000-yard season, has 5 touchdowns receiving and 5 touchdowns rushing, so he can do it all. But with DK Metcalf, you have limitations. He's just a receiver, and like you brought up the mindset and the attitude, DK Metcalf for me just doesn't have the right mindset or attitude. He's one of those people that he wants himself. He does as much as he would be happy that his team won. If he had a game where he had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards and his team lost, he would be happy. Where with Debo Samuel, even if he had that type of game, obviously he would be happy, but at the same time, he would be, comforting teammates. He would, push harder. And even if you look at, like, Debo Samuel's tweets, Debo Samuel is such a positive person on Twitter. He, legit, every time he always, like, a couple of days, he'll have those inspiring tweets. I don't know if you ever seen him, but, like, some of his tweets where he's like, just pull it, I pulled it up, like, 5 days ago. Stop leaving and you will arrive. Stop searching and you will see. Stop running away and you will be fine. Like, stuff like that. It's like, you hear DK Metcalf. I don't know if you heard, but like DK Metcalf was talking to Shannon Sharp, who's a Hall of Fame tight end, and like with that play where DK fumbled, and he started talking smack to Shannon Sharp. I'm like, dude, you're not even close to being Shannon Sharp.
Yeah, you have not arrived there yet.
You're not even there yet. I don't know if you're gonna be there by the time you're end of your career. So it's one of those things where it's like you're so arrogant, you don't have the right mindset, and you were trying to play hero ball by trying to push through and try to, instead of running out of bounds, which you should have done. Where with Debo Samuel, you wouldn't have that issue. Debo Samuel's has the right attitude, and Debo Samuel would have done what's better for the team, which would probably be run out of bounds. Or DK Metcalf, he was trying to play hero ball that game. So
Yeah.
stuff like that, little stuff like that, makes me lean towards Deebo Samuel over DK. And even the stats and just how well Deebo has been playing this season, I'm taking Deebo over DK. And that just, some people might not agree with that, but I mean, most people look at how well you are as a football player instead of if you have the right mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like if we look at Antonio Brown, like obviously when Antonio Brown was in his prime, he was definitely a better receiver, but did he have a better mindset and attitude than Deebo Samuel? No. So I also think mindset and attitude also, I care about mindset and attitude, so I'm taking Deebo over DK.
Me too. And don't forget that a new level for Debo will be unlocked when he has a quarterback that can get him the ball deeper down the field. Debo is capable of those receptions. It's really Jimmy's shortcomings that prevent the 49ers offense from running it more efficiently. But Randon McMahon, who I love, have had on my show, makes a great point here that Debo in a different offense may not look as spectacular. And for DK Metcalf in a different offense without Russell Wilson, you would wonder the same thing. That it really, a lot of it for receivers has to do with fit in the quarterback and offensive coordinator. And for Debo, this yak-based system is ideal to have a creative play caller like Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan. That is just a perfect fit. If now we can step up our quarterback room a little bit and Trey Lance is who we all hope he is, that could be the next level for Debo. And then no one's touching him.
Fingers crossed is Trey Lance. Trey Lance is the guy that can, give Debo the ball downfield.
That's right.
Hopefully he is that guy. So, yeah, shout out to Randall McMahon. He was on my channel on Sunday night for a post-game show. Go check out his podcast, Hockey Royalty Podcast, and the Genuine Draft Podcast. If you haven't checked that stuff out already, go do so. It's amazing. Go check it out. Go give his podcast a listen. It's amazing stuff that he does over there. So go check it out if you haven't already. Well, for the moment that we already had, if you saw the title, 49ers vs. Seahawks game preview. So now let's jump into the game. What are the keys to the game for the 49ers if they want to win this football game?
For me, it's about sticking to your identity. The Washington football team laid out exactly how the 49ers can beat the Seahawks. It needs to be a physical game that is focused on a run-first mentality where the 49ers run the ball, even with the Seahawks in a defense that sets up for them to try and stop it. Force them to prove that they can stop the run before getting cute and abandoning it and forcing Jimmy into a situation where he has to throw the ball. And it's all about keeping the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands. The time of possession for the Seahawks this year is wildly unbalanced. I mean, NFL record-setting by a wide margin unbalanced. And the 49ers need to keep their foot on the Seahawks' throat in that manner. They must continue to dominate time of possession as the 49ers have been able to and as the Seahawks have been struggling to do. You do not want a scenario where Russell Wilson gets the frickin' ball with 2 minutes left and a chance to tie or win the game, because Niners fans know how that turns out most of the time. And he certainly knows how that has turned out most of the time against the Niners. And there's a reason that mindset matters, that there is a big brother, little brother dynamic between some division opponents, because you start to believe that the other team has your number. And as soon as you believe that, it's fact. If you do not think you can go out and dominate, you're right. If you believe you can go out and dominate, you're right about that as well. So the 49ers must come into this game knowing that they can run all over Seattle and do just that and stick to it.
If the Niners want to win this football game, I'll make it simple and short. If the Niners want to win this football game, they have to run the ball down Seattle's throats, because that's what the Niners are good at. You're not going to, if you expect Jimmy Garoppolo to win you the game with his arm and go in a duel with Russell Wilson, who's the better quarterback, who can, throw more, have more passing yards and win the football game through the air, I'm taking Russell Wilson over Jimmy Garoppolo any day of the week. Any day of the week. Even with Russell Wilson's finger injury, I'm taking Russell Wilson with a fricked up finger over Jimmy Garoppolo. So if the Niners want to win this football game, they have to run the football down Seattle's throats. That's the only way they're going to win this football game. You cannot have what happened last time when we played Seattle. I was at that game. The Niners were passing the football. They weren't sticking to the run as much as they were what we saw the last 3 weeks. If you expect that to happen, you're gonna have the same result like last time. Jimmy might come out and do what he did last game to have a touchdown drive, but then when you continue to rely on Jimmy Garoppolo, it's not gonna end up well for you because the defense did what they were supposed to do last time we played Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
The defense had 5 straight 3-and-outs. But then Jimmy Garoppolo on the offense just couldn't capitalize because Kyle wasn't running the football. And Kyle was like, you know what, I'm going to rely on my quarterback and I'm going to make him throw the football. And you only scored 7 points. And the defense made all the stops. You just couldn't capitalize. You couldn't capitalize 5 times. So it's one of those things where, especially in Seattle, where it's a hard place to play because it's super loud, if the Niners want to win this football game, they just have to run the football because you're not going to win with Jimmy Garoppolo and you relying on Jimmy Garoppolo's arm to make you the throws that you need him to make. Jimmy Garoppolo with the solid run game, Jimmy Garoppolo will do enough for you to win football games. We saw the last couple of weeks, but you completely relying on Jimmy Garoppolo winning this football game will not work, especially in Seattle where it's loud and Jimmy might not be able to hear the play calls. It will not end up in your favor. So the Niners, if they want to win this football game, stick to what they're good at, which is running the football down teams' throats.
Run the ball.
I cannot emphasize it enough. But last topic, what's your score predictions for this game? Who do you think is going to come out and get the W this Sunday?
Absolutely the San Francisco 49ers. I hadn't done a great deal of my research yet on the Seahawks to come up with a formal prediction, but in mulling it over in my head, I see this breaking out as closer than we would like to think. I think it'll be reasonably close to the same number of scores that we saw in the first contest, but fewer touchdowns from Seattle, more field goals. I'm going to go 24-16 Niners.
Were you reading my mind? Because I was about to say the same thing. Because usually when we play Seattle's in the playoff conversation, and it obviously comes down to the last possession,
yes,
where it goes into overtime, or Seattle wins it by a field goal, or the Niners win it by a field goal, or make a stop at the 1-yard line, or something like that. Something crazy happens. But Seattle's been on a downward spiral. Russell Wilson with his finger injury, they just haven't been able to win games. So Seattle's been on a downward spiral. So with this game, I think the Niners will do enough and they'll score enough points. And I thought it was going to be 24-16. If this was any other year, I would say probably like 24-21 or something much closer. But since Seattle isn't the team that they were the last couple of years, they're not in playoff contention. They're 3-8, which I never thought, which you didn't expect coming into season to say Seattle's 3-8. We would probably see them. I thought they were going to be either second or even first in the division, or at least competing to get in the playoff race. So
for sure,
and to be a wild card team, but that's not the case with Seattle right now. So I'm saying 24-16. I feel like you read my mind a little bit on that one. So
great minds think alike, Amin.
I'm just a fan who enjoys sports. You're a great mind, my guy.
Appreciate that. But you are an up and coming star, my friend.
Appreciate it. Well, that basically wraps up the show. I appreciate you going with an hour with me to talk about some Niners football. You know, the team that we both love very dearly. If you haven't checked out Rob's channel, please go do so. The link is in the description. I'm pretty sure all my subscribers are Rob subscribers. But if you're one of those people, 1 in a million people that aren't subscribed to Rob's channel and you are subscribed to my channel, go and subscribe to Rob's channel. He posts amazing content over there. He posts clips of all his long streams. He does all good stuff, mailbags every Wednesday. He does amazing content, pre-game show, post-game show. He does all the Niners content you want. You go check out Rob's channel. He has amazing guests on there also. So if you haven't already, go check out Rob's channel. Hit his channel with the subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell notification. Hit all the videos with the like. Smash that like button for Rob. And go follow him on Twitter if you haven't already, at The Left Shoe. The link is also in the description. Go check out all of Rob's social media. Go show him some love. If you're not subbed to my channel, please go do so. It'll be very greatly appreciated. Hit the bell notification. I appreciate you for joining me, Rob. Go Niners. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.